Welcome to this week's episode of Hangin with Jon, or I mean, if it wasn't with Jon, it would be called Ask an Expert, but we're here with Jon. So we are very much so at Hanging with Jon, and this is going to be one of our last of the year, or this is going to be our last Hanging with Jon of the year, and it has been a really, really strong year. So without further ado, thank you, Jon, for joining us tonight and on this holiday week.
Thanks for having me again. I always like doing these. I'm looking forward to seeing all of the videos, and I'll do my best to be informative and moderately entertaining.
Wonderful. Well, I know informative and entertaining are difficult for you, so
both.
Yeah, exactly. No, both those things come very naturally. And thank you everyone for submitting your videos. And if you haven't been to a video review before, we have members who sent in videos ahead of time with some questions, and we're going to watch those videos. Jon is going to answer those questions directly. And so it's a really great opportunity to get an incredible coach to look at a video of you doing dressage or show jumping or cross country or trail riding, whatever you might be doing in the video. And if it isn't your video, feel free to ask questions in the chat. You can always ask questions related to somebody else's video or something that Jon is saying. And then at the end of the hour, if we have time, we will open the floor to more of like an Ask Me Anything. So if you have questions for that as well, feel free to put those in chat. I will relay those to Jon. But we have quite a few videos, so I want to make sure to jump into those. And we're going to start here tonight with Taylor. And I will add Taylor's video to the screen. And Taylor, this is Taylor and Marty, and we saw them on the last video review, and she said they received homework to try to slouch down and relax into the saddle more. She said you suggested using an EquiCube and doing more no stirrup work, and she's been incorporating all those suggestions over the past few weeks and thinks that there's been improvement. She's wondering if Jon also sees improvement and if he has any suggestions for improving their transition, since that seems to be where she is bracing, holding instead of relaxing through them.
Yeah, so the first thing that I noticed here was that in general, it's a lovely picture. The outline of the horse is quite good. You could say just a little bit, it looks still like maybe you're just holding and taking back with the rein to make sure that the horse stays round. But in general, I really like the trot work. I think it's the trot itself is starting to come more and more from behind. You're definitely sitting better. You can see in the canter there, you're maybe, if we're being picky, pumping just a little bit with your shoulders, if that makes sense, if you know what I mean, sort of pumping and bringing the shoulders back and forward a little bit. But I think that might be part of the process of sort of being able to slouch down into the saddle and relax down and in. The big thing as far as the actual transition from trot to canter goes is to know, and I know everybody says it, and I always try to find a way to explain this so that like it really hits home, but really and truly the reason that a horse comes above the bridle in a transition up to canter is because it's not engaging its hind leg into that transition well enough. Now, part of that is technique and riding and getting better as a rider so that you can move that inside hind leg up into canter. But also we have to be honest and fair with the horses and realize that part of it also is them learning that coordination. So I think I would say with the improvement that I've seen since the last one, I think you're on the right track with that. And so what I try to tell people when they're doing that transition from trot to canter and they feel like the horse is bracing against them is to really visualize, and look like you're in a pretty good safe place in that indoor where you could probably, when there's nobody else in that ring, just kind of close your eyes for a few seconds in your sitting trot right before you go to canter and visualize and feel the timing of that inside hind leg, and really in your head convince yourself that you only want to canter with your horse's inside hind leg. That's the only leg you want to make canter. That's the first leg for sure you're going to make canter, and get it to really jump up into that canter. And you're going to find that that bracing in the bridle will correct itself. You won't have to do anything with the bridle or your hands or really any correction in front of you, because you're going to make that whole correction happen behind you. you know, you can see as you watch this, like right here, it's a pretty nice outline, maybe just a little behind the vertical at times, but you look like you're really starting to get the hang of it. That equicube, or at least the idea of it, hopefully you got one, but the idea of it seems to really be helping your hands look quite good. And once you're into canter, it's good. The other thing I would think of here is that the last thing that comes when you're working a horse are the transitions, particularly the upward transitions. They're always the last piece. So you are like, gosh, I've got a really nice trot. This horse has a lovely trot and it has a lovely canter. Its whole shape and outline is really nice. But a lot of times we're like, you know, the trot's really good, the canter's really good. So now I have to kind of muscle this transition together and hold it together. But just realize that as your horse is working on that coordination, that's the part where they have to sort of change their balance, change their coordination, change the way their feet work. And you want to be soft and sympathetic with your hand, yet supportive. So I think you're on the right track. I see big improvement, and I would say be patient with those transitions. I know I have so I have one of mine that's just getting ready to go do, I guess, his third intermediate now. And it took me until he was going preliminary to really get him sorted out. And that was him as a like 6-year-old is when he finally started to get some decent upward transitions. So I think be patient. And I see there, I think I'm allowed to sneak into the comments here, Kinsey. If I'm not supposed to, tell me. But I see he's only 4 years old. I love him. He's a beautiful horse. You're doing a great job with him. Your position looks really good and strong. You know, the thing when you watch that video that you want to see when you're watching yourself and that I look for is that your seat doesn't separate from the saddle. That's the goal, that you're almost like suctioned down and sucked down or stuck into that saddle. I don't like the word stuck maybe because I don't mean stiff. I mean suctioned in to that saddle. And I see that so much more in this video than the last one. So I think it looks great. You're doing a really good job. Lovely horse. And I'm excited to see it in another month.
Marty is so cute. It is incredible that he's only 4. I love that so much. One follow-up question that Taylor sent is she's asking, what would you do to work on leg yields if all you had to work in for the winter season was a very short indoor arena?
That's a great question. So I do a lot of leg yielding on a circle. So spiraling into a 10, spiraling out to a 20. And I use that as well for some collection work, because lateral work to me is collection work anyway. And then you couple that with a 10-meter circle, and that is definitely collection work. So what I would do is, like on a 4-year-old, I would spiral in down to maybe a 10, depending on how strong you feel he is. It might be down to a 12 or a 15, and then spiral back out to my 20. And then when I got out to the 20, what I would want you to do is then go forward in your trot, whether that's rising or sitting, maybe not to a medium, but a little bit of a lengthening. And just the reward is go forward and then spiral in again and spiral out. The other thing you can do is, you know, you're probably, if it's a short indoor, you're not going to get a full diagonal. So just come out on your quarter line and leg yield towards the rail, and practice it that way. That rail will sort of magnetize the horse over there. And once you master that, then you could come out of the corner and leg yield over to the quarter line or the center line and not feel like you have to get all the way there. I also, and I think it's good for the baby horses, when you're starting the leg yields, kind of have to start to kind of understand them a little bit across the diagonal, but I do love leg yield on the wall in walk. I do that in a lot of the Ride IQ lessons that I've done as a warm-up. As long as he's a sensible young horse, which he appears to be from everything I've seen, I think leg yield on the rail is a really good thing. It doesn't have to be a lot. They're not supposed to be perpendicular to the rail, just, you know, just into 3, slightly maybe into 4 tracks with the haunches to the inside, having them fairly straight in front of you, and a little leg yield on the rail would be a really good exercise for him as well. I would probably say with him, and sort of being, because he's 4 coming 5, I would start, warm him up, get him stretching and trot and canter, and then come back to walk and then do it, so that he's thinking about being forward rather than just coming out cold and doing the walk leg yields, just to make sure he stays really in front of your leg.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that every lesson that Leslie Law has done on the app has the walking leg yield to start too. So yeah, pretty much pick any Leslie lesson that has it.
Yeah, it's a great warm up.
Yeah, absolutely. And to answer your question, absolutely, you can be looking at chat as this is happening. So feel free to do that. Taylor, love the update. Definitely want to see more of Marty. So keep those videos coming. The next one up is Mariah. And Mariah said this is a video of her and her lease pony Picasso during a beginner novice show jump round at Pine Top a few weeks ago. They had a good short warm up and the pony was feeling bold and they were consistently nailing a good distance to the jumps. Then we had a few minutes of downtime to walk around before they went in the ring. As you'll see in the video, they ended up pretty deep to the jumps in the first half of the course, and he felt a bit backed off, sticky off the ground. She'd welcome any general feedback as well as any tips for helping a good good warm-up translate into a good jumping round. One of the things she's worked on with coaches since this show is keeping her upper body more upright at the base of the jump and waiting for the horse to leave the ground before moving herself. So any ideas for exercises or mental strategies to assist in that area would also be greatly appreciated.
All right. So the first thing that I would just say as I watched you come into the first fence was the horse to me looked fairly counterbent. And kind of falling through the inside, and that is going to just kind of contribute to your horse feeling a little bit out of balance. It is nice, though, as you kind of alluded to, it looks like it keeps getting better and better as you go and stays in front of your leg. I think one of the things that you have going for you from the sounds of it is that he's a pretty laid back, quiet horse, which is a really good thing. But you probably need to, one thing for sure is make sure that you don't get caught standing around. When you go to these horse shows, especially sort of lower level events for young horses or schooling shows, the ring steward can be really panicky about getting people to the ring. And so they're calling you over super, super early. And you want to not, I have to say, actually, your turn to fence one was better than I remember. So you did a pretty good job there, actually. I think probably your biggest issue was that you were standing around. So like with a horse like this, I would want to jump and then go right to the ring. That means you need to tell the jump steward or the ring steward or the gate person, whatever you want to call them, that, hey, I'm here. I know what's going on. I will be there on time, but I'm not going to stand around by the ring because my horse falls asleep. I think that's one piece of this. I guess the other thing that I would suggest is with a horse like this, who does want to get just a little sticky, it looks like, when they ring the bell on a horse like this, I gallop off. So I go like out of the start box, cross country gallop, and then I get organized, take a breath, and settle them back down into the show jumping pace and balance that I want. But I make sure first things first with a horse that gets a little bit under the jumps like this and a little bit behind the leg, like there when we go 3 and what I'm assuming was a 2, I make sure I gallop and then settle them into the canter. And you'll actually, if you ever see me at a horse show, that tends to be the way I start most of my horses, unless they're absolute lunatics, because having them in front of your leg in the show jumping, I think in some ways is more important than the cross country, because it's such a small space that if you have a horse that gets behind your leg in the show jumping, it's hard to fix it through the course, right? Because you don't have a field to gallop across to sort it out. So they've got to come to the first fence really in front of your leg. But that said, don't just go running down to fence 1, right? It's about gallop off, then take a breath, settle in, and ride out of that, or in that really nice show jumping balance that you need. The other thing that I would ask is if you walked that course and you really owned the numbers down the lines, because it looked to me like that line closest to the judge as you were riding down that line, that you maybe didn't know what the number was or lost track of what the number was. And had you known, you could have probably kept pressing down there and gotten it done, or said, I'm not going to make it, and rebalanced and organized and added the stride in earlier so that it didn't become a chip. Because once that chip happens, then that starts to sort of escalate and build and get you into more trouble. So I think those are the things I would say is don't wait at the gate, get in the ring, gallop, and then settle down into your show jumping canter. And if you gallop down to fence 1, without settling down under show jumping, you can't blame me because I told you to settle down under show jumping canter. But you got to make sure that he's really in front of your leg, and then know the numbers. And again, it's not that you know the numbers because, gosh, you need to get 6 and a 6. But if you go put 8 and a 6, you know you're in trouble. And if you go 7 and a 6 and you know it early enough, you can make it work quite nicely. And Kinsey, I need to pause just 1 second, like not pause and get off, but we have a horse that's acting a little sick, and I need to find out if
totally go.
Sorry,
go.
Guys.
No, take your time. I think if anyone's going to understand, it's this group.
Okay, I think we're okay. 1 sec. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm back.
No, all good. I hope it's okay. We can always, just let me know if at any point we need to adjust this. Okay, Mariah, that your pony Picasso, I mean, man, could not be cuter. But also I wanted to say, what I sometimes found, especially at like Rocking Horse, where like the show jump warm up was like in a field, and then you go and showed up in this little arena. It was like, oh, the warm up was great because we were in this big field, and we got in the arena. It's like, oh man, this is a totally different environment than I was just riding in. So yeah, I feel like it's pretty easy to get like backed off when you get in the arena. So
totally, and those rings
at Pine Top.
Those rings at Pine Top can be quite tough because they're on grass. If you've had any rain at all, they get very slippy. I would also, that's actually a good point, Kinsey. I would question if, maybe you need studs, maybe you had too much studs. Pay attention to stuff like that. Because if the horses get nervous about the footing, then that can sometimes make them back off as well. The one positive thing I'd say in that whole course, your horse never stopped jumping well. Like, it jumped great. Even when it got deep and maybe dwelled or hung in the air a little bit, he still had his knees up and was jumping well and wanting to get the job done. So that's a really good thing. I've certainly had horses that do that and then they start scaring themselves and not jumping great. So well done, you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure the photos are cute with his knees like at his chin. Wonderful. Well, thank you for submitting that video, Mariah. This next video is of Kim, and this is from her and her horse Luck Dragons full gallop farm open training on 12/10, so like a little over a week ago. And this was their first training, and she's just looking for general feedback, but she thinks overall the round went really well, but would just love to get your thoughts.
So I like the connection. I like that you're not pulling your horse's head down. This is a really good example of a horse that wants to carry its head and neck up and out, but there's still a contact and a connection. So that's really nice. How old did we say this one is? Or did we?
We didn't.
Okay.
Kim, I don't know if she's here, but if she is, let us know in chat.
But I love him. He's like a nice, loose, big horse. He looks like a lovely type. And what I really like here is that you're keeping him forward and positive. The connection looks nice. You're not over managing him, but you're also not just throwing the reins at him and leaving him alone. He looks super happy to do his job. And the big thing I want to say to like everybody here is, as you watch that round, I think a lot of people would say, well, that horse needs to be rounder, needs to have his head down and be rounder. And in my opinion, he does not. Like, he looks connected. He looks good. You can see there, like between those first two fences he landed and he was on a cross canter. But it didn't affect anything. He just stayed happy and up in the bridle and connected and looks just totally keen and happy to do his job. And I think I see here that we think he's an older horse. He's 16 years old, and I love him even more now because he just looks like thrilled to do his job, which is really cool. So I think it's really good coming into the combination there. If I'm being super critical, I don't love touching them on the shoulder in front of the jumps. I think if you want to touch them on the shoulder, it needs to be a little bit sooner than that because it can be a little distracting sometimes and get the horses to just kind of be slow in front because they're spooking at the fact that you smacked them on the shoulder. But that said, he was also bulging out the left shoulder, and you smacked him on the left shoulder and it straightened it up, and it certainly seemed to work. But if I'm being picky, that would be one thing. But in general, I really, really like this pair. It's pretty cool. Well done.
Jon, when you're walking your course and like you're deciding how many strides you're going to put in between any sort of lines, are you then, when you're riding the course, are you counting in your head?
Yeah, it depends on the horse and how schooled they are. So with a young horse that doesn't have enough rideability to be able to confidently predict what it's going to do, I'm a little more laid back about it, and kind of just let it sort itself out. But yes, I'm counting the strides on all of them, because let's say I'm riding my 5-year-old at his first event. I don't know with Pretzel yet really what his length of stride is when he goes to a competition. I know what it is at home, but I don't know really what's he going to do at a horse show. And so if I have a 6-stride line early in the course and I canter down there and we get 6, then I know, all right, I'm on it. Like the combinations should ride well now because I got 6. If we go back to the Pine Top video, right, we had that outside line where the horse added the stride. And then later on in the course, we had a double of 2 strides, and we went, I'm assuming these numbers are correct from what I saw, a double of 2 strides, and we chipped in a 3rd stride there. If you know that first line, like, gosh, we added a stride, then you can gallop on a little bit, be a little bit more positive and get it done, or get it sorted out, I guess I should say, so that when you jump into the combination, then it's sorted out. So yes, on the young horses, I always keep track and count. But that said, it's not like I don't ever want anybody to feel like if you go down a 6-stride line and it's going to be long in 6, you have to make the 6 happen. You just have to jump it. And if 7 happens, then you just want to have that information to know so that you can then be correct and sorted for the next fence on course. With the older, more experienced horses, then yes, you have to know, quite honestly, because it is so precise. Even at preliminary, but certainly at intermediate and advanced, it is so precise. The courses are getting so technical. They're almost like proper show jumping tracks now, that not only does every stride matter because it's related to the next fence, and if you go 6 and a 5, then you're going to make a mistake at the next line and chip and have a pole, but also you have to know because time is really difficult to make when you get to intermediate and advanced. And if you are adding strides in all the lines and are not aware of it, then you're not going to make time in show jumping. It is actually quite difficult to make the time in show jumping and jump clear. And so you need to know what all those numbers are. I mean, there are times where I'm on course and I know that I'm on a big scopy horse and there might be a bending 9. And I think, okay, on this one, I could actually go 8 if I stay inside, and that's going to save me a half a second. So I can wait and be a little more patient into the combination and give my horse time there. So there's a lot to do with it. And I would say this, Kinsey, and I almost mean it literally. When I walk a show jump course, I say to my students, I know every grain of sand and every blade of grass that I'm going to step on from the moment I get into that ring until the moment I leave it. I can tell you exactly what my plan is. That doesn't mean that I'm not flexible and that I don't reorganize things in my head as needed, or if something happens, I readjust. But I 100% go in knowing from the moment I walk in the ring what fences I'm going to show my horse, where I'm going to circle, how I'm going to salute the judge, what I'm going to do after I salute the judge. Do I need to go forward? Do I need to collect? What turns I'm going to make? I also know after I finish the course and go through the finish line, where I'm going to go to circle, how I'm going to pull up, and whether or not on that horse I'm going to give them a long rein and walk out on the long rein, or if I need to trot out of the ring, or how I'm going to get out there to keep them calm and cool so that the next time I go in the ring, they're thinking about it being a really positive, fun place to be.
Wow, that's really interesting. I kind of would have clearly wrongfully assumed that you're just like so used to it by now that you're not having to think about all of that. But it is really good to know that you are being that thoughtful, even with like your lower level horses. That's really interesting.
Yeah, no, I try to be. I will say one little trick that I have used because look, you have the plan and then sometimes things go wrong, or like I do lose count sometimes. So there are times I'll jump down a line and, maybe the horse jumps big and jumps me a little loose, or I just simply lose my train of thought and I'll canter down the line and I'll think, oh man, where am I? What am I doing? And I'll count by twos at that point, because then I'll know, is it an even line or is it an odd line? And if I know it's even and it's on a 6, or it's odd and it's on a 7, then I know I can finish on 2 or 1, and I'm probably right, because I'm probably not going to screw it up by 2 strides. So that's just a little trick that I use sometimes when I do get into trouble and I lose track, because I just think, okay, 1, 2, 1, 2. I know that because I knew where, but I forgot what the number was.
Yeah, I think that's a great trick. Awesome. Well, that's really, really helpful. And what a beautiful round at your first training, Kim. That was so good.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this next one is Krista, and I'm going to share my screen because she sent over a YouTube, but let me know if it's too blurry for you and I can send you the actual YouTube link to look at on your own computer, but I think we should be okay.
So far, so good.
Okay. It's a little bit, I don't think that's the speed, that's like buffering. Okay, so Krista said here is when she went cross-country schooling at Three Lakes. At the beginning, she was riding timid and they had some stops. Then she started riding better and keeping her shoulders behind Stella as she took off at the jumps and keeping her leg on to support her and riding forward to the jumps, not backwards. But as you can see, she is not with her on some of the jumps. She said she's concentrating on the rhythm of the canter. So sometimes she misses the distance, or honestly, she doesn't know exactly what happens. Maybe she's jumping, maybe Stella's jumping her out of the tack. But some of the jumps look like she is, this is Krista's word. She said some of the jumps look like I'm just a shit rider, which I don't agree with.
Yeah.
But some of the, what can I do to fix this? And other than just practice more, is there something I can do to stay with the horse's motion at all times?
So like, there's a great example of what she's talking about, right? Over the little wall there where the horse just sort of sticks and you feel like you get left behind, Krista. I think a couple things, like when I first watched you ride down to the jumps on cross country, I thought that sometimes your horse jumps almost too hard and she looks like she just loses her balance a little bit and like kicks her hind end up behind her and lands very steep on the backside of the jump. So I would keep that in mind and be really mindful that you don't jump too big too early, because with a horse like that, sometimes you can spook them a little bit. But also I think, you're right that there are some things that you can probably do to help this horse. And one of those things is going to be when you get to that place where you feel like you're going to get left behind, don't get too stressed about what your upper body is doing. Be really focused on what your leg and your lower body is doing. So if your horse is hanging in the air, you want to make sure that your leg is on. And I mean on as you approach that fence in the last stride, but to the distance that you're coming to, which in this case was a distance where the horse is getting maybe a little bit up underneath the fence and jumping up as opposed to jumping across the fence. So the horse hangs in the air, like I said earlier, dwells in the air a little bit. And so I don't want you to come faster necessarily, although sometimes that might be the answer. Sometimes you just have to say, come faster. And although that's maybe not like the most clinical description of what to do, having the correct pace does matter. But if you're getting there and you feel like you're getting left behind, make sure your leg is on. And then when you land and go forward, get away from the backside of the fence so that your horse starts to learn that it can't hang up there in the air and then land in a heap and then sort of hang out. You're going to get away from these fences. You're going to teach your horse that on the landing side, it goes. That's going to help it to not want to hang in the air, because it's going to know, oh man, when I hit the dirt on the other side and my front feet touch the ground, mom's going to make me go. I better be ready and go forward. The reason that you get left behind is you're actually doing the right thing instinctively, which is, oh boy, this isn't going to be perfect. My horse is in a little bit of trouble. And I need to stay behind it to make sure that I'm supporting it. I think actually almost all of those jumps there, you actually were in the appropriate place. But you got to have more leg on, and make sure that you have soft hands, which I think generally you did, that as you get left behind, as long as the reins go, you're okay, right? Like think of Mary King. She was always behind. Like I love Mary, but she was always in the back seat and behind the motion on cross country, which honestly, I don't like. Like that's not my style, but it worked for her. And I'm not going to argue with Mary King as to what she was doing because she's like unreal. But the reason it worked for Mary was because she's a very forward-thinking rider. She gallops away. She always gets away from the fences so she could stay behind the horse. Her leg's on at the base. Her leg is on across the fence, and she's getting away from it on the other side. So it works fine. And she always gave her horses freedom of their head and neck. And so I think as long as you're doing that, it's fine. Don't get too worried if you get left behind there, like, oh, how do I fix that? Because then you're focusing too much on your upper body, and it really has so much to do with what you're doing with your leg and your lower body.
Krista, my takeaway from that is that you're basically Mary King. So that was my main takeaway. I love Stella and I love Krista. That was
it looked
so
fun.
Fun to see them.
And I love Three Lakes. That's such a fun place.
Yeah, it looks like awesome schooling. So we did get a question from YouTube going back to the video of Picasso when you were saying that you want her to like go in the ring and like gallop before she goes to kind of start her round. Can you clarify exactly what you mean by that in execution? Like, are you going in like trotting into the ring, saluting, they're ringing the bell, and then you're galloping? Like, can you clarify that a bit?
So that's a great question. So if I were on that horse, knowing that round were possible, right? And by that I mean those little chips, for lack of a better word, those distances that you got stuck. If I knew that were a possibility with a horse like that, I would trot into the ring. I would, first of all, if there were any bogey fences, I would show them that. And that sometimes isn't what you think. So you have to pay attention to how the course is jumping. If there's a Liverpool, I probably would show them that. I would wait for the bell. And then the thing I always remind people is you have 45 seconds from the time that bell rings until you have to go through the start. So that's a long, long time. So once the bell rings, typically what happens is most of us go, oh my God, I got to go. And we run to the first fence and, we haven't really prepared for it. So on that horse, yes, I would wait for the bell, salute the judge, get the bell or the tone. And then I would pick up trot. Then I would pick up canter. And then I would have planned out, like I said, I would have planned out where I'm going to do this. I would get on a circle and I would gallop off or gallop up alongside. And then I would balance as I entered the turn to the fence. And then I would turn. And when I say enter the turn, I mean like as I'm 180 degrees to the fence, I'm going to jump, right? As I'm going past it and I'm getting ready to roll back to it, I would balance, organize the canter, take a breath, settle down into it, come through the turn. And I would exit that turn to fence one in my show jump canter, having taken a breath. Obviously, that's assuming that I'm on a horse that I know I can settle back down after I go forward. There are some horses that if I gallop off, especially thoroughbreds, you gallop off and then it's like off to the races, and that's a bad plan. This is only the plan that I have for horses that are prone to that sort of round. If it's one that's more forward thinking, I do go forward. I soften up, I lighten up, I try to get off their back and let them come forward and then settle down into those horses as well, but maybe not quite as aggressive as we're talking with this particular situation.
Yeah. And that seems like, honestly, it seems like something that would be good to practice like that exact series of events at home, because like that is kind of a lot to try to figure out when you're at a show, like I'm going to go and execute all of this. So I think, getting like in the habit of doing that at home is probably smart.
Totally, Kinsey. And I think, that's one thing is at home, we practice so many of the skills or drills, right? Here's our gymnastic. Here's a bounce. Here's, we're going to jump this single fence or come through the turn and jump that single fence. One of the things that I do here is either 2 weeks or 1 week before an event, my horses jump a course at home. If it's available, I'll go somewhere else and do a course, but I can set it up at home, and most of us can. It doesn't have to be, 15 efforts, but if all you've got room for is 6 or 8 fences, you can jump them both directions. But I set up that course and I practice with all of my horses riding the course so that I at least have a little bit of practice with them and know what they're going to do. Especially for me with a baby horse or a young horse, I do that where, like my pretzel horse, who, like I said, who's getting ready to start eventing this next year. He's starting to do courses here at home now because I know he's a good little jumper and whatnot, but I don't know what he's going to do when we put a bunch of jumps together unless I do it.
Totally. This makes me like the Picasso's round and this topic reminds me of, I was in show jump warm up at like one of my first prelims with Jen Carter, and Jen was like, Kinsey, this is your canter to go in the ring. And I was like, Jen, I am galloping right now. Like there's no chance this is the right canter. And she's like, no, like, trust me, this is your canter. And I go in, I do my show jump round at that pace that she told me. And it was luckily at Ocala where like you literally don't even have to like stop moving out of the warm up. Like you just like are in that like little ring and then you're straight into the show jump round. And I went back and looked at my video afterwards and I was like, wow, like I was not a gallop. Like it felt like a gallop, but it was actually like the right canter. So, I mean, in this case, there was a video and it was great, like great to see. But I think videos can also be really helpful just to be like, wow, that actually was a great pace. And it wasn't what it felt like, which can be helpful.
Yeah. And that's why knowing the numbers is really helpful too, right? Because you think, gosh, I'm really going forward. And then you go down the 6 and 8 and you go, oh, I'm not, right? Like it's proof. That's proof that you know what your stride is. Or you go down it, and this happens a lot too, and you're down there in 4.5 and you're like, oh, I'm insane. I need to slow down, right? So you want to pay attention to those details, not because it, matters what the number is, but it tells you what your canter is, which matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, this is really, really helpful. And that was a great clarification. Thank you for that, Jon. And thank you guys for all the great questions in chat. Keep those coming. Okay, so this next video is Debbie. And the wonderful Debbie is just asking for some pointers. She said she pops out of the saddle a couple times for a couple seconds, but she comes back and is just looking for some general feedback on this jumping round.
So first thing I'll say here, this is Debbie, is that what you said? Yeah, okay. First thing I'll say here, Debbie, is I feel like your stirrups are too long. So I would try shortening up your stirrups a hole or two. I think that might help you get your leg on underneath you because your leg is just a little bit out in front of you, like in what we call a bit of a chair seat position, which then makes you want to stay in the back seat and sort of fall in the saddle or land in the saddle rather than landing in your stirrups. And I think that's really important that you're landing off these fences in your stirrups and not in your butt, in your bum. That's quite good there. And I love, you're looking where you're going. Your eye is really good. Your hands are totally in the right place. But they do look just a little bit stuck from time to time. So I think you want to keep thinking about having your hands, although you want to keep them quiet, also keeping them soft by letting them move, right? I think sometimes when we're learning how to build connection and contact with our horses, our hands can get a little bit stuck and a little bit stiff because they're totally in the right place. Like they're actually textbook there, but they need to just, like I was saying, what's the name of the girl on the paint horse, Kinsey? I'm a terrible person. I'm sorry, guys.
Taylor, the first one?
Taylor. Like I was saying to Taylor in the last time, like slouch down into your horse and relax a little bit. I think you need to think about that as well with your arms. Like don't try so hard. Just let your arms relax a little bit and follow without letting them, go elbows out and all over the shop. The other thing that I think I would say is it looks to me like sometimes when you're making your turns, that was a really good turn though, but you'll see what your coach did there is they had that rail on the ground that you had to stay inside of to make your turn to that combination. And I am willing to bet that your coach did that, or whoever set the course for you did that because they know you need a little help with your turn. You can see here as you're making that turn, your horse is just sliding to the outside a little bit. And I've seen it a little bit both directions where as you're making your turns, it looks like your horse just falls a little bit through the outside of your turns and kind of slides around like you need four-wheel steering. So think a little bit about your outside edge, your indirect outside rein, your outside leg that you're guiding your horse around and not just sort of turning your horse around. And then one other position thing that I think will be helped with a little shorter stirrup is that your foot has slid through your stirrups all the way to the heel of your boot, or like what we call home. And that makes it very difficult to have your lower leg on correctly. So when you're jumping, you want your toes out at about a 30-degree angle, maybe heels down. So it's like you're like a duck, and you want that stirrup right on the ball of your foot. If your foot gets slid through, you lose the flexion in your ankle, and then your lower leg can't get on correctly and things kind of get stiff and stuck. Or you stick your toe out in front of you and then they get loose and sloppy. So I think you want to think about correcting that lower leg, having your heel down, toe out. All of that said, what I really liked was that you kept looking to the next fence. You kept focusing where you're going. Like you jumped, it was right at the end. I think you had maybe a bounce of X's, and you just, like, you weren't perfect going into it. You looked like you knew you weren't perfect, but you totally trusted that if you got your horse there and you rode positive and forward, that he was going to jump it and be fine. And he was. I think it was a really nice course. I think the exercises that were in it were super and appropriate. I love the use of the placing rails in your bending lines to keep you riding straight from your outside aids. And as much as I want you to be better, right? And I mean that, like, to be able to continue to improve. I want your hands to improve. I want your hands to get better. I want your lower leg to get better. And I want you to work on all those details. As much as I want all of that to happen, what I love is that you're obviously having a lot of fun. So your horse is having a lot of fun. You're not over managing and pulling things together and riding like you're trying to make everything perfect. You're just doing the best you can out there. And it looks like your horse understands that and appreciates it and wants to do the job for you, which really is what we're all trying to do.
Jon, when you say like softer hands, I think that can be, at least for me, it can be a bit confusing. Because are you saying, like, can you just clarify that? Like, do you actually mean, rather than softer hands, do you mean just like following elbows?
Yes. So when I talk about soft hands, if you think of this, so big picture answer here, if we think about connection, right? And by connection, I mean the ability to have communication with your horse from your leg through your hand to the horse's bridle. There's a certain amount of weight that's in your hand. So let's say, for argument's sake, that a horse goes with 3 pounds in each rein, okay? And I'm making up a number. I have no idea what that would be, but that sounds like a nice number. So 3 pounds in each hand. If that's the weight that your horse wants, and we're doing it textbook correct, we want to have that connection, that 3 pounds in our hands all the time, even over the fences. So we don't want to get to the fence and loop the rein and throw the rein away, because then when we land, we have to take all that slack back up, and then making that turn to the bounce of X's is going to be really difficult because it takes us a stride to take up that slack. So when we're talking about soft hands, we're talking about hands that are capable of having 3 pounds of pressure in it all the way down to the fence, on takeoff, in the air, and on landing. And that if we had a scale on our elbow right here, God, I wish we could. It'd be such a great teaching tool. A scale on your elbow right here, that weight would never change, because your hand is like an elastic band to your horse's mouth, and you're just able to maintain that contact all the time, because cranking him in the face over a fence makes them really not want to jump. But dropping them on takeoff equally makes them really not want to jump. We have to have soft, sympathetic, educated following hands. That's what we're all trying to get all the time. And it's a life quest. And once you think you've got it, then you lose it.
Honestly, I feel like watching you ride is like the textbook soft hands. Like, it's just like, it is, I mean, not to totally give you a huge compliment, but
I can't even
it's
fit
true.
my hat on anymore.
I know. Yeah, your head is getting so big.
It is.
But no, it is amazing how much you have mastered this skill.
Well, and I appreciate that. And I will tell you, it is probably the thing I think of when I ride more than anything else, because it is, you know, obviously your leg and your seat and all that really matters. But if you're yanking them in the face or dropping them, and like their mouth is so sensitive. And I'll watch videos of myself riding, and the first thing I look to are my hands, and I always want to make sure they're where they're supposed to be. It is a bit of an obsession of mine. And it's part of the reason why, if you see me ride at competitions, I tend to ride show jumping in black gloves, but I ride dressage and usually cross country in white gloves. And I do that because it helps me focus on my hands. It makes me hyper aware of them while I'm riding, but also when I'm watching videos, it's the first thing I'm drawn to. And then I can make sure that I'm doing a good job. So the reason I jump cross country in white gloves is not because like it looks awesome, which it does, but also because it makes me focus on my hands all the time and be really aware, and also aware that like, okay, idiot, if you're going to ride in white gloves, you better have good hands because people are going to see them. Right. And I remember Robert Dover said that to me years ago. He said, I want you to have hands that are good enough to ride in white gloves, and you better have them because you're going to ride in white gloves and people are going to see them. And I think that's just something I am hyper focused on for sure.
Well, it's paid off for sure. It is. Yeah. And anybody who has an opportunity to watch a video of Jon, you will know what I'm talking about, or watch Jon in person. I think sometimes when coaches say like, soften your hands, it can be easy for riders to think like, oh, like loosen my grip. Right. And it's like, that is just like, for some reason, the communication there has been lost over the years. But yeah, that is really helpful. So Taylor is asking, what exercises would you suggest for a horse who defaults to behind the vertical, even when jumping and with light contact and without interfering? She said she's been using placement poles and keeping contact as soft and long as she can safely. Okay,
so that is one of, if not the most difficult things to deal with, is a horse that has a neck that gets short and sucks back behind the vertical. It is so hard to fix. I had a horse named Direct Merger I rode years ago around Kentucky, and it was such a good cross-country horse, but he had this problem. And we used to joke that he had anal neck fasciitis, because if you pulled on his face, his head would come back so far that it would go through his body and out his butthole. He just was so hyper flexible in his neck. It was so difficult to fix. So first thing I would say is make sure you have the right bit. Make sure you have a bit that your horse is happy to grab and take a hold of and pull on, because without running off with you, but you have to have a bit that your horse is comfortable to pull on. You typically want to stay away from bits that have leverage. If you do want something with leverage, you need to make sure you have a chin strap, like a flash noseband I always use if I have a lever bit, so that I can, if you pull on the bridle and you get that, which way am I going? You get that leverage, right? That pulls back this way, that it lifts up on the chin and makes them want to pick their chin up. So equipment does matter. You have to have the right equipment. So that's one thing that I would do. And then honestly, the other thing is, going back to what we were just talking about, have really good hands that your horse is going to trust, right? If you want your horse to take your hand, you have to give your horse a hand that it can trust. I think some horses, not all horses are going to go the same. Not all horses are going to go like the horse that we were watching at full gallop, with their nose up and out. Some of them want to go rounder. I have my Just My Style horse, and he's a very good show jumper. He goes round, and he goes 2 round. So I have to have incredibly sympathetic hands with him. But I also have to make sure that I don't just loop the rein like Kinsey was alluding to, and just drop the rein at him and ride him on a loop rein, because then he panics and he sits there like this, like, oh God, when is this idiot going to grab me in the face again? So I have to ride him in a bit that he's super comfortable in. So I love, this is not product endorsements here. This is just sort of things that I use. I love plastic, like Nave type, or like a Duo Springer D-ring bit, that are those real soft plastic bits. Sometimes leather bits really help. Or another one that's a really good bit is a Waterford bit. Those can really help with those sorts of horses, but you just have to think about what do they like in their mouth, and then make sure your hand is really doing the right thing.
Awesome question, Taylor. That's helpful. And it wouldn't be a Hanging with Jon without a product placement. So yeah. I mean, it's only appropriate. Oh, yeah. Look at that. That's so convenient. Jon has a big Summit logo on his chest, which feels like it was on purpose.
It really wasn't. I wore it all day. I haven't changed.
Yeah, sure. Well, Jon, I mean, and everybody who submitted your videos, thank you so much. Those videos were awesome, and I thought that was really helpful. If you guys have questions, more questions related to those videos, put those in chat. But you also, if you have questions unrelated to those videos, put them in chat, because we have a couple minutes here before the end of the hour. And in the meantime, Jon, what are your plans for the rest of the year? Do you kind of give your horses time off? Or are you kind of full schedule powering through the rest of the holidays, or how does that look at your farm?
So my horses are actually all in work now. They had some holidays after Terra Nova, but I actually didn't have any. I didn't have any of mine due along this autumn, really. So I gave them a short holiday, and then they came back into light work at home. So they're kind of trotting, and they started full flat work, I guess, last week. And the plan is to have them out sort of mid-January. But because we're coming to the holidays, I'm also not too upset if we miss a day here or there. I don't have any dad jokes. My jokes are completely not ride IQ appropriate, to be honest.
Okay, Taylor. Taylor is requesting Jon's favorite dad joke, and apparently they're not safe for hanging with Jon. So I guess you could reach out to him directly, and he could relay those jokes to you, or we could put an explicit notice on this, which we've had to put explicit notices on Ride IQ content before, so it wouldn't be the first time.
With me?
No, I don't think with you. You tend to keep it PG-13 at least.
Right, I try.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, you guys, if no one else has any other questions, I will give you a couple of minutes back here. And Jon, thank you so much for taking the time with us, and just looking forward to more Hanging with Jons come 2025, 2024.
And 2025, but let's do 2024 first.
I don't know what year it is. I really don't know what year it is. I was with a doctor recently, and I had to very much so look at what year it was. So yeah, that's good.
Don't feel bad. I screw that up all the time. Real quick, you want to talk about not knowing what year it is? When I went for Jen's immigration hearing, they asked me what year we were married, and I got it wrong.
Oh no.
And then we got in a fight about it, and the officer looked at us and said, "Yeah, okay, you guys are obviously legitimately married, so we're not too worried about it. You're fine. Come on in."
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. How were you 1 year off, or were you more than 1 year off?
Yeah, I said 2001, and it was actually 2000. And I told her, I'm like, look, yeah, I was wrong, but that's because being with you is so easy and wonderful that it just seems like it hasn't been that long.
Did she like that?
No, she told me I was an idiot. And I was like, you didn't marry me for my brains, apparently. I don't know what to tell you.
Oh my God. Well, that's wonderful. Jen has a heart of gold for
She's a tolerant woman for sure.
Yeah, tolerant for sure. Wonderful. Well, tell Jen and Caden happy holidays, and just appreciate all that you do for us, Jon.
Yeah, well, same to you, and everybody on the what is this?
On the stream. On the stream.
Right. I thought it was like a particular brand, but StreamYard, is that right?
Yeah. On the YouTube or Facebook for the users.
There you go. On the YouTube or Facebook group. Happy holidays. And I'm super excited to get doing one of these again in January.
Wonderful. Well, actually, Jon, we did just get another question in chat. So let me sorry to do this.
No, it's fine. I got all the time in the world.
Okay. They're asking, they said the last time you were on, you mentioned that you recommended intermediate and
hold on, I'm losing it. I think that might be me. Say it again.
Rather than finished horses. Do you have can you hear me now?
Now I can.
No, you can't hear me?
Now I can.
Okay. Okay. You can hear. Okay. This person is saying that in the last Hanging with Jon that you mentioned that you recommended intermediate to advanced riders getting greener horses. rather than finished horses, do you have an age range for where you start looking at in that light?
For horses age range?
I think horses.
Yeah. You know what? It's all budget based, honestly, at that point. So like I bought a really nice 2-year-old because financially that's what made sense. And I wanted to get the best horse I could for my money. So I bought a 2-year-old, and then I had him stay at the breeder's, who's a wonderful lady. And she looked after him until he was almost 4. And then we broke him out and away we go. I don't have a problem getting a horse that, like in this sort of, like with that piece of advice I gave, where it's a sort of 5-6-year-old horse that's maybe done some training levels, maybe even played with modified or done a preliminary. But to me, the more time I can put in on the horse in the beginning, the more I know that horse when I get it up the levels. And something that was said to me years ago by Darren Chacha has kind of stuck with me, which is if you're going to buy a horse with miles, you better really like the miles. And I think there is, look, I'm not saying there's not value to getting a horse that has experience, but I think once you sort of know your job, at least to a certain level, if you can start the horse yourself, or at least be a part of starting the horse yourself, right? Like be involved in producing that horse. And if you're a greener rider, then you need more guidance and more help. But for those riders with experience who've done some stuff, I think the more you can start them yourself, the more you're going to know what you have when you go to that first big event with that horse, and you know what its reaction is going to be. And that stuff that it takes years to develop, right? Like it takes so much time, and then you start to believe in that horse. You start to know what it can do. And I've had several horses over the years that I took to big events, and I know other people were thinking like, I don't know if that one really has it, but I believed it because I knew the horse that well and I knew it from the beginning. So I think, you know, if you get one that's sort of done a training level or 2, that's a pretty reasonable thing to be like, okay, now it has a little bit of proof that it wants to do the job, and that's sort of a little bit of insurance on it. But honestly, if you're patient, I think the younger you get them and are a part of starting them, the better off you're going to be.
And do you have for the rider, do you have like a minimum age that you would have a rider suggest that a rider get a greener horse?
Minimum?
For
No.
a rider.
For minimum age for a rider?
For a rider.
No, I think it's more experience based, right? Like for sure, I'm not going to tell an 11-year-old kid to get a 3-year-old horse. But that said, an 11-year-old kid getting a 3-year-old horse who has a parent who's a very good horseman, or a trainer that is very involved in the program and is going to be there every step of the way, every day. I think there is huge value in that. But that probably with a kid wants to be a second horse, not the first horse. It wants to be, because you want the kid to go out and also know, like, because as I say this, I went to my first advanced when I was 19, and it was at Pine Top, and I was on a horse named Prairie Schooner. Awesome horse. And he had gone advanced, and I did have to learn to ride him. Didn't matter that I knew how to ride. I had to learn how to ride him. But when I was in the start box, it was reassuring to be able to say to myself, all right, Schooner knows what he's doing. Just do your job. Don't make too many mistakes. He'll take care of things. And he did. That was an incredibly special horse. So there is huge value in that. But that said, once I learned that, then producing my own horses, I was much more successful that way. And look, maybe that's just what's worked for me. But I've seen it with most of my people that I've helped, the ones that sort of got those horses at a younger age, as they got to the top level, they had more success percentage wise. But no, I think look, a young kid or a super green adult doing their first horse, they want something with a little bit of experience for sure. And there is value to that. And if you have a ton of experience yourself and you want to go out and go intermediate tomorrow or advanced tomorrow, then yeah, you need to get a horse that's already there and doing it, and just make sure it's a horse that you are on the same page with.
Absolutely. That is very, very good advice and the perfect spot for us to actually end this time. So thank you guys all for coming. You guys in chat make these events so useful and fun. And we really, really appreciate you coming and joining live. And Jon, thank you for everything and looking forward to the next one.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Again, happy holidays, everybody on the stream.
Happy holidays.